Right. Okay. Well, we'll get started from there. I'm sure more people are going to be joining us. So welcome to the first of 3 warm-up sessions as we gear towards our next Meet the Russell Group live virtual fair, which is running on the 29th of September. Today, what we've got planned for you is a conversation with 8 Russell Group universities. We're going to be asking them a couple of questions to get us going, and then we're going to be going through to a Q&A session where you guys can ask all the questions that you want on the Q&A button down at the bottom. We'll go through some of these and hopefully we'll get as many answers as we can possibly. So today, what we've got for you is we've got Ashley Patson from Imperial College London. We've got Hannah from the University of Cambridge, Alice from King's College London, Louise from the University of Liverpool, Gemma from London School of Economics, Sarah from Newcastle University, Anam from Queen Mary University London, and also Rao from University College London. My first question today is going to go through to Ashley Patson. That question is, how do I apply for a place at university in the UK? Thank you, Ashley Patson.
No, thank you very much, and good afternoon to everybody. So yeah, as you've just heard, my name's Ashley. I work at Imperial College London, and obviously my role is just about to talk to students like yourselves about going to university. Now, in terms of how you apply to university in the UK, there's many routes for you to get into university, whether that be through higher national certificates or higher national diplomas, foundation degrees, access courses, and there's so many different routes. So do make sure you speak to your tutors and your counsellors at school to get all the information about all the different routes. But the majority of you will likely be applying through a more traditional method. That method is something which we like to call the UCAS process. So UCAS, which you may have already heard of before, so it's spelled UCAS, stands for the Universities and Colleges Admissions Service. So it's a web-based service that students use to make applications to higher education institutions. Those are institutions, universities that offer you degrees and other certificates as well. So it is a central organization that processes your application, and it's for full-time undergraduate courses at UK universities and colleges. It's a web-based service, as I mentioned, and it has a web-based portal. And it's the way that you can track your application through to all the different universities that you do apply to. You can access it by going to just ucas.com, and that's where you'll register for UCAS, and any of your applications will go through there. Now, you use this system, as I said, to apply to universities and courses that you're interested in studying, and you can make up to 5 choices through UCAS. So those choices can be either 5 choices at one university, or what most people tend to do is they apply to one subject, but apply to 5 different universities. So it might be law, it might be engineering, whichever it may be, but then they'll apply to that at all different universities. And the important thing as well is when you do apply through UCAS, that the universities that you apply to, they can't see what other courses you've applied for, and they can't see what other universities you've applied for, unless, of course, you've applied to the same university more than once. But that is the process, and that's where you'd go to apply to university. It's through ucas.com, and you register on the website and on that online portal, and then the whole application process goes through that portal. So yeah, I'll hand back now to Martin, but that's the overview of the application process very quickly.
Perfect. Thank you very much for a good start. I should mention also, when you're using the Q&A section, if you can address in your question if it's specifically for a particular university on our panel today, and hopefully that will ease the process in them replying to your question. Right, next we're going on to Hannah from the University of Cambridge. Hannah, the question is, what type of information goes on the application form?
All sorts of information goes into your application form. Obviously, you've got your personal information, but this is also your opportunity to show universities why you are the applicant that they want. And you do that mainly by using the personal statement, which I know some of my colleagues are going to talk about a little bit later. As Ashley's already mentioned, you get one UCAS application for all 5 of your choices. There are all sorts of things they're going to ask you for, lots of boring details like your date of birth and your name, but they're also going to ask you for an education history. And I think this is a kind of a surprisingly important kind of piece of information to have, because having worked for a number of different universities, I've seen people put all sorts of things in their education history. And the thing that's really important to know is that universities are interested in where you did your GCSEs or equivalent and where you did your A-levels or equivalent. And if you did those qualifications or the equivalent of those qualifications at several different institutions, so say you had to move schools halfway through your GCSEs, or you did some A-levels and then you later did a different course, put all of those different institutions in. But the most important thing is universities aren't particularly interested in your primary schools, so it only needs to be those kind of institutions that you put in. Another important thing to know is that particularly if you're applying to Oxford or Cambridge, alongside choosing a university on your application form, you will also need to choose a college. A section of the application form that I think isn't really spoken about quite enough is that there is a section on the application form where you can add additional details about extenuating circumstances. So that could be things that have happened to you during your studies that might have negatively affected your studies. And it's also an opportunity for you to tell universities any detail that you want about any disabilities that you might experience. I would strongly encourage you to supply as much detail as you feel comfortable about any extenuating circumstances or any disabilities, because it allows the university to consider your application and you as an applicant in a well-rounded way, and to consider your application in the context of who you are. And it's never going to disadvantage you. So it's important that you include as much as you feel comfortable with there. In addition to the UCAS form, if you do apply to Cambridge, after you've submitted your UCAS, you will also fill in what we call the supplementary application questionnaire, the SAQ. And I'll talk about it a little bit more later, but this is just something we use to gather a little bit more information, some more detail about the qualifications you've undertaken. And it's also an opportunity to supply a supplementary personal statement if you are applying to a very niche course at Cambridge, but that is only for Cambridge. Thanks very much. I will hand back to Martin.
Superb. Thank you so much, Hannah. Our next question is for Alice from King's College London. Alice, when are the deadlines, and does it matter if I miss these?
Hi everyone. Okay, great question. So there are several deadlines for UCAS. So you can find all these deadlines on the UCAS website, but I'll tell you some now. So the first one is the 15th of October. So that is the UCAS deadline for Oxbridge. So if you're applying for courses at Oxbridge, so Oxford and Cambridge, medicine, dentistry, and the veterinary sciences. So this is a really important deadline. If you do miss it, it is really likely that you will have to wait until next year to reapply, as they're really competitive. So there's not usually much leniency. So if you are applying for those universities or those courses, then do make sure you get your application in on time. Then you have the 29th of January. So that's the UCAS application deadline for all undergraduate courses that weren't the 15th of October ones. And this is what UCAS calls the equal consideration deadline. So anyone who applies by this deadline, unless it's the 15th of October courses, will be given equal consideration. So you're not more likely to get offers if you apply earlier. And because of this, it's a really important deadline, especially for competitive courses and universities. Sometimes some universities and courses do stay open and they do take late applications, but it does mean that you won't have equal consideration to those applicants who applied by the deadline. And then there's another few key dates. So they're not necessarily deadlines, but I just wanted to point them out. You've got on the 25th of February, you have UCAS Extra open. So that's if you've used up all of your 5, because you have 5 applications to make. And if you've heard back from all of them and you hold no offers, then you can apply to courses to universities that still have courses that are open. And then on the 5th of July, that's when clearing opens. So if you're not holding any offers from a university, you can apply to courses that are open through clearing. But the main two are the 15th of October and the 29th of January. I do want to mention that those are the UCAS deadlines, but you may have other deadlines such as aptitude tests. So if you're applying for medicine, dentistry, or veterinary sciences, you may be asked to sit the UCAT or the BMAT, And if you're applying for law, you may be asked to sit the LNAT, and for some other universities, such as Oxbridge, they may ask you to sit some specific aptitude tests as well. And each of those tests will have different deadlines, and different universities have different requirements of when you sit them. So I really recommend you do your research, check the university course pages. They're not trying to trip you up, but you'll find all the information there, and check the test websites because you'll need to book slots. And if you leave it too late, then you'll have less options. And it's worth mentioning, you may think, oh, those deadlines are so much later than I thought. And it might be that your school or college actually have internal deadlines. And they're there for a reason. I really recommend you meet your school's deadlines, that your teachers aren't putting them there just to be annoying. It's to give them the time to read over all your applications, and then give you the time, if there's anything you need to change, you're not doing it in a rush at the last minute. And also remember, your teachers are the ones writing your reference. So if you've got lots of other people applying, that's a lot of references, and they need time. And also, the earlier you complete and submit your application, the more time you have to focus on your studies and getting the grades you need to get into the universities and the courses you're applying to. So that's it from me. I'm going to pass back over to was my video not on the whole time?
It wasn't, unfortunately, Alice, but
oh,
no problem at all. It was
okay. Well, I'm turning it back off.
It was the answer that we were after, so that was fantastic. Though, thank you so much, Alice. Just to cover a couple of the questions that I've seen in the Q&A with regards to universities that aren't involved in the session today. We are actually running 3 webinars in total. So we've got the one today, we've got the one at the same time next week. So that's going to be Wednesday, the 22nd, and then also Monday, the 27th of September. So during the course of that, all 24 Russell Group institutions will be talking. So you've got your 8 today, you've got your 8 next Wednesday, and then you've got the other 8, which will be Monday, the 27th. So there's going to be a good opportunity to speak with absolutely everyone. Right, okay. So thanks again for that, Alice. I'm now going to pass over to Louise at the University of Liverpool. Louise, the question is, how important are entry requirements, and do we need to meet them?
So 2 parts to that question. First off, are they important? The simple answer is usually yes. We set them for a reason. So please remember that even though we're all different Russell Group universities, we are separate from one another. So what we ask for in our entry requirements could be quite different to one another. So as Alice has just mentioned, it's really important you double check websites to find out exactly what we're asking for. The universities will set these requirements because we're wanting to find students who will actually match up with our courses. So we want students who are going to be highly successful and of course complete our courses. So that's why we'll ask for certain grades, perhaps particular subjects, a portfolio, an interview or an audition, just so we can meet you to make sure you're the right person as well. So we will set these requirements. They're very important for us. For some very popular or highly specialized courses, quite often we can't be terribly flexible about that. So they are specialized courses, so you need to have particular background for them. But if you think that your academic history, for example, is sort of on the right path, but doesn't quite match up exactly with what we're asking, do contact universities in advance, because you don't want to waste one of the spaces on your form by applying to one of us where we're not actually going to really consider you. So it could be perhaps we're asking for a maths A-level, but you've got some other sort of maths qualification which you think we might like to consider. So contact us in advance just so that we can consider it and then let you know whether it's worthwhile applying to us or not. Also, as Hannah from Cambridge mentioned as well, also let us know about any mitigating circumstances. So if you've had any particular extra disruption or long-term illnesses, let us know about those in advance as well, because then we might be able to be a little bit more flexible if we know what your circumstances are. So the second part of that question was, do you need to meet those requirements? Well, the easiest answer is yes, that will make your path much simpler. So if you receive an offer from a university and you meet the terms of that offer, then your first choice university will guarantee you a place. Now, when we receive your application, whether that's October or in January time, we'll assess your application to work out whether we want to give you an offer or not. And then once we receive your qualifications, once they're all confirmed, usually in August time, that's when we will confirm all those people who achieved the grades. So it's really simple for them. But sometimes if we've got spaces left, Individual universities do have the option to actually reconsider those students. So for example, if you've applied to something like architecture and you've had a fantastic portfolio, so you're showing great promise and really great skills in that area, but perhaps you've dropped one of your academic grades slightly. Now, the university is not obliged to honour a place for you because you didn't meet the terms of your offer, but if we can see that you've got great promise, we might be more flexible and we may still admit you. So you may hear from time to time about students getting into courses when they didn't quite meet the terms that they initially were asked for, but it really is up to each separate individual university. So research all the options, what you're actually required for each course you're thinking of applying to, but open those methods of communication with the universities as well, just to make sure we know enough about you to make a fair decision. So I'll hand back to Martin now.
Superb. Thanks a lot, Louise. Our next question is for Gemma from London School of Economics. Where have we gone? My question's gone. Oh, bear me 2 seconds. Here we go. Right, apologies for delay. So our question then for Gemma, do universities consider the EPQ?
So in answer to your question, for most universities, the EPQ does not actually form part of the standard entry requirements. So when you get given your offer, it's unlikely that you will be requested to have a specific grade for your EPQ. However, it is a good idea just to double check with each individual university, as this obviously can be adjusted depending on the situation. There are some cases where the EPQ may be included as part of an alternative offer, like I said, so check the different admissions web pages of your specific university. So whilst most universities don't include it in the actual offer, the EPQ can, however, still form a very useful part of the application. And this is because most universities will recognise that the value that the EPQ brings in preparing an individual for their independent study. Applicants may find that the research they undertook to complete your EPQ is a really valuable discussion topic to include in your personal statement. And it's a great way to reflect how you have extended your academic interest into a topic beyond the curriculum. So it can be really a good option for you to add depth to your personal statement, and therefore, even though it's not necessarily included directly, it can make the difference between two candidates who have very similar academic grades. And I'm going to pass back.
Superb. Unfortunately, I've got my questions nicely lined up for the next person. So we've got now Sarah from Newcastle University. Sarah, what should I write in my personal statement?
Very good question. Thank you, Martin. So the personal statement is probably one of the most important parts of your UCAS application, alongside the contextual information section. And it's where you can showcase to the universities you're applying to why they should choose you over the thousands of other students that are applying for that course in university. So what should you include? What I want to do is break it down into a few sections and what you might want to put into those sections as well. So first of all, start off with the course itself and why you want to apply to that course. Why does it interest you? How do your current studies relate to the course? So for example, we've just been talking about the EPQ. If your EPQ question relates to the course you want to apply to at university, then this would be a good way of demonstrating and using your EPQ in your application. But what you need to do is show that you understand what the course requires and that you can find out more for course content on each of the university's websites. But I think what you need to do is keep it slightly generic if you're applying to several universities for that course. Second up is your skills. So you really need to research your course using the university websites and think about the skills that are required for that course and how you can demonstrate them. So for example, a course that has group projects in it will require you to have good teamwork skills. So what you need to do is give good examples of where you've gathered these good teamwork skills from. Then moving on to your achievements. So these can be personal, academic, you know, from a variety of different areas. So, but they need to have purpose, and it needs to relate to the course and perhaps to demonstrate your skills, etc. So what have you achieved that you're proud of? What positions of responsibility have you had? What makes you interesting or unique? And examples of this could be, have you been a prefect at school? Is there any sports that you play? For example, do you play rugby, football, netball? Can you demonstrate that you've excelled in that? But also you could link that back to being able to demonstrate that you've got team skills as well. Any music qualifications, charity work, if you've done the Duke of Edinburgh. But the main thing to make sure you do is not just list these achievements, but make sure you're constantly relating them back to the course and demonstrating how they help you to understand and stand out as an applicant. The same can be said for your hobbies and interests, which is the next section. So to make this interesting, you can talk about your own experiences. So anything that you've done outside of school or academia, but make sure it kind of, again, relates back to your course, and think about how your hobbies might demonstrate your skills and abilities. And the final section before your conclusion is about work experience. So for those applying to courses such as medicine and dentistry, work experience is really important. So make sure you do your research about what each of the universities requires on that basis, because they might have different requirements around the length or type of work experience for medicine and dentistry, or veterinary science as well. But in general, include any examples of work experience you have. So you can talk about the skills you've gained again and how this would help you in your course. For example, if you've had a part-time job working in a bar or a restaurant or a cafe, then you can demonstrate that you've had to demonstrate great responsibility, that you've got team working skills, that you have communication skills for dealing with the public and taking orders. You could have been helping out at school or college, volunteering, work shadowing, but again, the most important thing is to link this back to the skills that relate to your course and the topic of your course. So in conclusion, you need to summarise your key selling points, mention that you have any future plans that you might have. So do you have a specific career in mind that links to that course and why you might want to be studying it? But make sure that you focus on the course for this part of the personal statement and what can you finally offer the university that you're applying for. A final just point to say is that you do only have 4,000 characters, which gets used up very quickly. So it's really important to be succinct in what you're saying. And if you can use one example to demonstrate several different things, then that's a really good thing to do as well. And then final top tips from me is make sure you write several drafts of your personal statement, double check it for any spelling or grammar mistakes because they will be picked up, and make sure that you get friends, parents, teachers to check it over for you as well before you submit it. Okay, thank you, Martin, back up to you.
That's great. Thanks a lot, Sarah. I know that writing a personal statement can be very, very daunting, and Sarah's obviously covered some really, really important information. But one of the more daunting elements is actually getting started with that personal statement. So I'm going to pass you over to Anam from Queen Mary University London. Anam, the question is, can you give me some practical tips on how to start writing a personal statement?
Great, thank you very much, Martin. I think Sarah's done a really great job covering a lot of what the personal statement entails. But I know that for a fact, for many students, one of the toughest things is actually putting pen to paper. You know, where do you get started? And a lot of this really depends upon how much planning you've put into your personal statement. And this is where it's really important. I think for many students, when they approach the personal statement, it can sometimes become something a lot bigger than really it needs to be. One thing to bear in mind is, to think about the purpose of the personal statement and why universities or how universities actually assess the personal statement, what they're looking for. So if you can start to think about the personal statement from that perspective, it starts to give you an idea as an author, because that's what you are the author of your own work. What is it that I need to mention in this personal statement, and what are the key things that I need to ensure that I cover? So taking that all into your planning will really help you with your writing and to really get started. So what I always say to a lot of students is to do what you always do when you start a piece of work, is to start thinking about maybe brainstorming, maybe forming some mind maps of the things that you need to mention. A good brain dump is a great way to get everything out there and start to filter all the information that you've got. You've just heard that there is a word limit on the statement as well. So maybe start to create a few baskets in which you can drop some of the things that you think you need to mention in the personal statement. So maybe start to think about maybe your qualities, your experiences and skills as one basket, and start to maybe make a note of some of the things that you've achieved over the last few years. Maybe link it to the course itself. So maybe something from an academic perspective. Maybe you studied a particular topic which you can mention and expand on that, in terms of the benefits and the experiences which you acquired. The other important aspect is why you're applying. It might seem like a very obvious thing to you, but to those of us who have to read it, it really needs to come across very clearly, rather than just something that becomes a lot of waffle. So try to structure your statement, but that doesn't necessarily mean, for example, that you have to write the introduction first, because of course that's always the first hurdle is, how do I get started? What's the first line? And we always, say to many students when they start this process is, avoid the fancy opening lines and, avoid spending too much time on the intro, because by putting so much pressure on yourself, to get that first line right, you can find yourself, having a mental block. So, avoid the most obvious opening sentences and avoid those cliches, so that you actually stand out from the first line, because you've got to remember there's thousands of applications that we're all reading, and the last thing we want is reading the same old boring line. So try and avoid that. Don't rely on someone else's words. So maybe ditch that opening quotes that a lot of students have used over recent years. Instead, we want to know is why you want to study your particular subject. So don't waffle, just get straight into it. And that's probably the best thing to do. So maybe create a mind map, a brain dump of everything, start to filter it out, put it into boxes in regards to how you're going to use that to refer to the course, and then use that as your starting point. You don't necessarily have to follow the writing in a linear format. Once you've got everything, you can start to put everything into some sort of chronological order. But before that, just write what comes to your mind first and then go from there. So those would be my top tips. Back to you, Martin.
Fantastic. That's great. Thanks, Anam. Okay, so our final question from the first run is for Raul from UCL. Raul, why do some universities ask for extra information?
Hi, everybody. So you will find that some institutions will ask for more information because we're very keen that we get the best students who are the best fit for all of our degrees. So that could be the LNAT test for law, the BMAT or the UCAT for medicine, or you might find for some degrees where we're looking for information or skills that the personal statement or the UCAS form actually can't deliver for us. So if you're applying, for example, architecture, you'll almost certainly be asked to include a portfolio of work or perhaps a design test. The same for other design degrees as well. So really, it's all about us gathering information from you to make sure that you are the best fit for the programs that we offer. So I'm going to leave that there.
Fantastic, thanks, Raoul. Okay, so we're going to go back to the start again with our panelists. So we're going to start again now back with Imperial and Ashley Patson. Ashley Patson, what are the benefits of studying at a Russell Group university above other universities?
Good afternoon. So yeah, back round to me. Yeah, so there's a lot of different benefits of studying at a Russell Group university. So Russell Group universities consist of 24 universities, and all of these universities will of course share like a common focus to perform excellent research and aim to achieve kind of academic also like superiority, so to speak. Like you want to do the best they can in terms of research, the best they can in academia and their teaching. So if you are looking at Russell Group universities, again, it's like that's kind of what you're joining, that's what you're looking to be a part of. You're looking at the top universities in the world, and there's three kind of things I'll say that are the things that you'll be gaining from that. So one I'll say is access. So that'll be access to high quality teaching, access to the top class and the latest hands-on research, and that will kind of imbue you with the kind of invaluable transferable skills. There's also reputations. Reputation is a big part of it. So with the Russell Group universities, with the immense reputation that they tend to have, those universities tend to invite the best minds from across the world. So you often have like 34, I think the percentage, 34% of academic staff from Russell Group universities come from abroad. And I think it works out about a quarter of students as well are from non-UK nationality. So there's a huge diversity in kind of the student body and the teaching staff as well from all over the world, which gives you a vast kind of understanding and a different way of approaching things. So you should hopefully get kind of a well-rounded education as well. And then of course, employability. So this can often give you an edge. Going to Russell Group University can often give you an edge in employability, with some recruiters in some jobs specifically targeting Russell Group graduates for their jobs and for to recruit into their institutions. I think the average works out about something along the lines of 10%, an increase in 10% of their salary from those that have gone to Russell Group universities than others. So I think those are the three things I'll look at: access, reputation, and employability. Those are the things I think that you gain by going to a Russell Group university. So I think that's what I would say. Thank you.
Fantastic, thank you, Ashley Patson. Our next question back over to I think Hannah from the University of Cambridge. Hannah, what are the main differences in applying to Cambridge and Oxford?
Okay, I think this is a really good question. And having worked for a number of different universities, it's certainly something that's become very clear to me. There are 6 key differences that I can think of. The first is your UCAS deadline. For both Oxford and Cambridge, your UCAS deadline is the 15th of October, as was mentioned earlier. Secondly, you can only apply to either Oxford or Cambridge. You can't apply to both. In addition to that, unlike most universities, when you are selecting your university, as I mentioned earlier, you will also select a college. There are lots of different ways that you could choose a college. There's lots of information on our website, or you could come to our virtual open days that are happening in the next couple of days if you'd like to find out more. The important thing to consider when you're selecting a college is that the college you select doesn't have an impact on your ability to get into the university. Some colleges are more oversubscribed than others, but if you are a strong applicant, there are other entryways into the university, and that will be very clearly considered on your application. So, and we also offer an open application now. So if you're not worried about which college you want to go to, but you just know you want to go to Cambridge, you can make an open application and you'll be assigned to a college. Now, the fourth difference between applying to Oxford and Cambridge as opposed to other Russell Group universities is that for all of our courses, pretty much, we require students to do what at Cambridge we call assessments, and what Oxford they call tests. For some courses, these are taken before your interview. And somebody in the questions, thank you very much, has already brought up a question around pre-interview assessments. You need to be registered for your pre-interview assessment by the 15th of October at the latest, and it is your assessment centre, which in the UK for UK students is usually your school or college, that will register you, and they must have done it by that date. You will then undertake your assessment in early November, and there's more information about that on our website. Most of the assessments don't attract a fee, but there are 2 assessments, the BMAT for medicine and also an assessment that you do in relation to maths that do have a fee attached. That's worth thinking about as well. We also run at-interview assessments. Now, because we are running all of our interviews online, and we'll talk more about interviews in a minute, they could also be around the same time as your interview. You will get full information about your assessment sent to you by your course. But if you've got a pre-interview assessment, or if you're not sure if you have a pre-interview assessment, I would strongly urge you to go and look at the course page and make sure you know whether you need to register or not. Assessments are used as a part of the broader application. We take a very kind of well-rounded approach to looking at students. And so although a weaker performance on the assessment isn't a kind of death knell for your application, a weaker performance could be the deciding factor in whether or not you become a student at Cambridge. The 5th thing that is a bit different, I touched on earlier, between applying for us and applying to other Russell Group universities, is the Supplementary Application Questionnaire, the SAQ. You will receive a link to complete this after you submit your UCAS form. This allows Cambridge to gather a bit more, and this is something we do at Oxford, it allows Cambridge to gather a bit more information about you. Most specifically, we like to know a bit more about what you've studied in your A-levels or your equivalent course, kind of particular modules. And it also gives you the option, as I said earlier, to submit a supplementary personal statement. We provide this option as we know that some of our courses are very niche. So you may be applying to history at other universities, but you might be applying to Anglo-Saxon, Norse and Celtic at Cambridge, which is much more specific. The important thing to know is that the SAQ is a vital and compulsory part of our application process, but the supplementary personal statement, which forms a part of that, is optional. So if you don't feel you need to complete the supplementary personal statement, you will not be penalised for not doing it, but you must complete the SAQ. And finally, the 6th thing that I think really sets us apart, and I think this is probably what everybody thinks about when they think about Oxford and Cambridge, is our interviews. Interviews are designed to be like a supervision, which is part of the teaching style at Oxford and Cambridge. It's not like a job interview. We're not going to ask you for examples of when you've completed excellent team working. It's more like an academic discussion. These will be continuing to take place online this year, and obviously that's kind of in review for the following year. They're designed to assess your academic potential. So this will look at things like your analytical skills, your problem solving, your ability to kind of take on new information and talk about it quickly. Some colleges might ask you to read information or texts before your interview, and then so that they can then be discussed, but not every college will. For more information on any of this, we do have open days, virtual open days running for the next couple of days. So if you'd like to come along, please do register. But that's everything from me. I will hand back to Martin.
That's great. Thanks a lot, Hannah. Right, we're shooting now back over to Alice at KCL. Alice, what would be your advice to someone who isn't sure if university is right for them?
Great question. Hopefully you can now see me this time. So firstly, I just want to say that it's totally okay if you feel this way. University isn't right for everybody, but there are ways to make sure that that is the right decision for you. So I would recommend looking at all the options available and do your research. Any of you who are on this session today, that's great. Coming along to the main virtual fair on the 29th of September, so you can speak directly to all the Russell Group universities, chat to current students at fairs, and then if you're able to attend any open days. We just mentioned about virtual open days. Some universities will have in-person ones, some will be doing virtual. I would recommend going along to those as well to get a feel for the universities and see whether there are any courses that we offer that you're interested in, and you might be surprised and find something that you like, or it might confirm that it isn't right for you. And I think that's okay. I think speak to your teachers, to your careers advisors or counsellors, whoever it is at school that's helping you, and talk to them about your options. Speak to people who, if you know anyone in your life who has been to university, have a chat with them. And I think it's just about, just going along to as many events as possible, to see whether it is right for you, and then looking into your other options. It may be apprenticeships are something you might prefer, and there you can chat to your teachers at school about that. So I'm going to hand back to Martin now.
Thanks, Alice. And I think you touched on something well about kind of going to events, etc. And hopefully you'll all have seen that I've added in a link on the chat to the next Meet the Russell Group virtual fair running on the 29th of September. So if you haven't already registered for that event, be sure to click on the link, find out a little bit more information and register when you can. Well, superb. We're going to move on to the next person then. We're back over to Louise at the University of Liverpool. Louise, what are the main things to consider when picking a city to study in?
Okay, so I think top things that students should really think about are firstly the location. So find out where that university is actually located. So University of Liverpool is actually in the city centre of Liverpool, but that's not always the case. So find out where the campus is, and if there are multiple campuses, so find out where you'd actually be, and also where things like accommodation and things are, because that can really impact your day-to-day experience of university, whether perhaps you were thinking that you'd be able to just walk to uni, but actually the reality is you'll have to catch a couple of buses. So have a bit of investigation into the location. Also think about the social side of university, because of course we've all been focusing very much on the academic side of getting into a Russell Group university, but you can enjoy yourself while you're here as well. So have a bit of a look about what is on offer that you might want to be able to pursue. So if you've got interests in particular sports or things like that, investigate whether you can keep going with those. Investigate, are you someone who likes to sort of go out at night, or perhaps you're more focused about access to green spaces and beaches? So you want to be able to find the right environment for you. But also you want to have a bit of a think about the cost of living. Now, I've lived in quite a few different cities in the UK and internationally, and your money will stretch considerably further in some places than others. The north-south divide is quite real in this country, so it's a wild generalisation. Northern cities tend to be a bit cheaper, but also investigate options for getting part-time jobs, because that might help with your finances. So those sort of big cities will often have lots of opportunities in sort of the entertainment industries, hospitality, and so forth. So really the location, look at the societies and things like that as well. Think about the cost, but then lastly, try to actually visit the place. You can always do research online, look at videos, listen to other people's opinions, but there's no real substitute for actually seeing the place in person. Sometimes it's quite hard to identify what it is about a place that feels right, but you'll know it when you get there. So have a look at university websites. Do have a look to see if there is the opportunity to go and visit in person. Now, a lot of us aren't doing full open days at the moment, but we, and I'm sure lots of others, are offering some campus tours and things like that. So have a look at what your options are, just so that you can really find a place where you're going to be happy and successful. So Martin, back to you.
Thanks a lot, Louise. Okay, our next question is through to Gemma at LSE. Gemma, what changes, if any, do you foresee over the next couple of years as a fallout of COVID?
Okay, so this is probably a big question that's playing on a lot of people's mind at the moment. And it is clear that COVID has had a big disruptional impact on educational settings. So potential applicants should really feel reassured that universities are aware of the difficulties that this has produced, and do aim to be as understanding and supportive as best as they possibly can. So I've noticed that in the chat, there's quite a few questions about GCSEs obviously being out of your control and things like that. Please do understand that obviously GCSEs will still form a part of your application, as it is a requirement that you list them on the UCAS, and these everyone has who has studied within the UK setting, for the majority anyway, will have been awarded CAGs. So these will be looked at in relation to the fact that we know that during that time these were centre assessed grades by your teachers, and therefore you will be on a level playing field against everyone else. In terms of the international scale, again, we are aware of disruptions, and we will mitigate and look at these factors in light of that. So the application process will not change as a result of COVID. But what has shifted, however, is that the deadline is now a little later than it was a couple of years ago. And as has been already mentioned, unless you're applying for Oxbridge, where the 15th of October deadline remains, all other applications to be considered for equal consideration must be in by the 26th of January. So that's one impact that COVID has had, is it's given a slight extension on how long you have to get that application in. This does obviously though mean that most universities now will obviously potentially take a little longer to reply as well, as their deadline has now shifted in terms of getting a response to your application back to you by the 19th of May. So it is also really recommended, as has been mentioned already, that you do double check different programmes that may have separate admissions exams, as again, the LNAT, the BMAT and the UCAT may also have slight adjustments for different universities for the entry requirements of those. So just look carefully at those different deadlines. Another key factor is that most universities are keen to ensure a return to in-person teaching for this year, although it is likely a hybrid model will remain for those coming into this cohort. So in terms of what this means for you guys in the future, no one obviously knows quite what's going to happen with COVID. So we're hoping obviously that it will continue to be managed within 2020 and 2023. So it's just a good idea to stay up to date with the different university website pages. Often they will have a news page which will outline their processes in relation to COVID. Universities are also aware that the demand for places are high and therefore looking to ensure that they can effectively and safely support as many students on their courses as possible. So admissions staff really do recognise that students may not have had the same opportunities during the COVID restriction times, and therefore things such as work experience or attending different universities to see lectures in person may not have actually been part of your preparation in the way that you hoped so. So things that have been done remotely will be viewed positively, and like I said, everyone has been in the same playing field. So if you haven't managed to achieve things that you wanted to do, try to think of alternatives and be creative in the way that you access your materials. One thing that's really key to mention is that unless an individual has had significant disruption beyond that of the normal lockdown experience that's been felt by the majority, it is unlikely that you should really consider COVID as an extenuating circumstance, and therefore it's not really something that would be looked at as submitting an extra form to outline these mitigating circumstances. This is obviously very dependent on the individual though, and a school may look to discuss with you whether it might be suitable to note in their reference or to actually put in an extra form if you have faced some very severe personal difficulties, things such as family bereavements or technological restrictions that have prevented you being able to access online learning. So that's a conversation you may want to have with your referee or with someone you trust at school, just to gauge as to what level you think that your situation goes above and beyond the experience that everyone has. And I think that's a good summary of COVID as best as possible in the ongoing changes. So passing back.
Thanks a lot, Gemma. I know that was a very, very open question and difficult to answer, so thank you very much. Next, we're going to be passing over to Sarah at Newcastle. Sarah, how can I adapt my personal statement if I'm interested in multiple courses?
Again, a good question, it's perfectly possible to do this. Universities will be expected, well, it's not unusual for students to apply for multiple courses. They often are linked in some way, but if they're not, again, there's still ways around getting things across in your personal statements. So as I mentioned in my previous answer, it's all about linking the skills. So if you can look at the different courses that you're wanting to apply for and look at the similarities in those courses that they might have in the skill sets that you need, the subject areas, or anything that you can find that similar, that you can then join together to demonstrate your reasons for applying those courses. But it's if you've got one that you're more interested in than the other, then obviously that would be the one to kind of give a little bit more information about. But if you can be as generic as possible with the other information, linking it slightly to the different courses that you're wanting to apply to, then that's kind of the way to do it. So for example, if you were wanting to apply to, I don't know, someone just put a question in the chat about applying to business psychology and business management, both of those have roots in business, so you could talk about your interest there, but then you could also mention slightly the different nuances between the business management and the business psychology. So it's looking for the similarities so that you can make the most of your character count. One thing that I am just going to do is from my previous answer, I have got a PDF of the points that I covered, which I'm going to pop in the chat now as well. So hopefully that will be helpful to everybody. But hopefully that answered your question, Martin.
That's great. Thank you very much, Sarah. Okay, we're going back round to Anam at Queen Mary. Anam, do Russell Group universities offer scholarships and bursaries?
Yeah, that's a good question. So most Russell Group universities provide scholarship opportunities, grants and bursaries for their students. These may be granted on the basis of household income, academic achievements, extracurricular activities, volunteering, what region you live in, the subject that or course that you might be applying for, and other various reasons. So all Russell Group universities do have a page on their websites that talk about the funding support that they offer to their students, or ones that external groups offer to students at that particular university. So I really recommend that you do your research prior to making your application to see what's available out there. There are a number of different scholarships and bursaries that are applied automatically, which you don't need to apply for. And information from your UCAS application is used to assess whether you are eligible. And if you are, then you're automatically processed for that. However, there are other scholarships, for example, where you need to specifically apply for them, and they come with different deadlines. So you need to be really aware of that when making the application. So the majority of the funding support are bursaries and funding rather than sort of full scholarships. But you should be able to find the relevant funding opportunities on the university websites. Bursaries may be offered by the universities as a series of overlapping initiatives. So it varies from university to university. And what they try to do is try and prioritize those in greatest financial need. You know, it's assessed in those terms. So key thing is to make sure you do your research, maybe consult the UCAS website along with the individual Russell Group University websites. If you're maybe considering collegiate universities such as Cambridge, then you'll need to check the awards, for example, in their particular colleges, and also check what the eligibility criteria is for the awards to see whether you actually can apply in the first instance. So yeah, lots of research required.
That's great. Thanks, Anam. Okay, we've got one more question in our second round of questions. So it's going to be going to Raoul at UCL. Is there any advantages to submitting an application early?
We get asked this an awful lot, and I would say is the official stance that we have for all of us here is that all applications will be considered in exactly the same way if they are received by the UCAS, the various UCAS deadlines, so be that the 15th of October or the January deadline. What I would say is that students who apply early are certainly at UCL statistically, I think probably more successful because actually they've worked and set up on their personal statement earlier, and they've done more work to give them the opportunity to actually complete and focus on their studies. So it won't make it easier for us to accept you. It will make it easier for you to focus on your study and actually gaining the grades that you need to join our institutions. I'd say that's the main advantage of getting an early application in, is that as soon as it's in, then you're freed up from that and you can actually just start getting down to some serious work in your final year of A-levels or whatever sixth form study that you're involved in. So I'm going to leave that there.
That's great. Thanks, Raoul. Right, I think we're going to do one more round of questions, but please do keep the questions coming through in the Q&A. A lot of these questions that we're asking are coming directly from you guys, so hopefully we're going to be answering as many as possible, but please do have them keep coming through. Right, so back around to the beginning again with Ashley Patson at Imperial. Ashley Patson, does exceeding the minimum entry requirements give you any sort of advantage?
So it can do, and again, it's a wider question. So it depends on what you've been asked, what you've been offered. So when you do apply to university, there are minimum grade, often there's minimum grade requirements, and if you don't reach those requirements, it's very unlikely for you to be accepted to the university. However, if you've been given an offer on UCAS, and they've given you 1 A star and 2 A's, and if you exceed that, that doesn't necessarily mean it will increase your chances of getting into university based on your offer. But when universities do make you an offer, as I said, they look at your
Ashley, you've managed to put yourself on mute.
Oh, hello. Oh, so I'm back. Hello, can you hear me now?
Yeah, we've got you now.
So where was I? So when you're applying to university, we look at your application as a whole. So we look at how many A-levels you're doing, if you're doing an EPQ, or if you're doing any extracurricular activity as well. And that will often help us give you an offer based on the activity you're doing and the extracurricular work you're doing throughout your life and throughout your application process. So it technically doesn't help if you exceed whatever offer they've given you, but often universities will give you an offer based on what you're already doing. So if you are doing 4 A-levels, they may give you a slightly different offer based on if you're doing 3. So at Imperial, for example, a typical offer if you're doing 3 A-levels may be A star, A star, A. But if you're doing 4 A-levels, then they might give you A star, A as an offer. So again, there's those changes there. So it doesn't necessarily help at the end, but it might actually help in terms of what offers university may provide. So if they look at your, say a university accepts maybe A and 2 Bs as a standard offer, but you're doing 4 A-levels and you're predicted 4 A stars, you may, and you're doing an EPQ and you're doing all these other extracurricular activities and your whole application is really robust, they may end up giving you maybe an unconditional offer where it doesn't matter what grade you get based on the fact that you're likely to exceed their offer in the first place. So it's a more complex question, but based on your offer, whatever your offer is, it doesn't necessarily help at that stage if you got if you exceeded the offer that they've asked for. So hopefully that kind of helped. So again, it's a more complex question, but hopefully that gives you a rough idea of what that process is like.
Yeah, no, that was absolutely perfect. Thank you, Ashley Patson. Right, going back round to Hannah at the University of Cambridge. If you apply to Oxbridge, do you also send off your application to other universities at the same time, or do you wait until the main UCAS deadline to apply to other universities?
So this is quite a straightforward question to answer in many ways. You apply to Oxford or Cambridge as part of your main UCAS application. So the application for all of your universities is sent off at the same time by the 15th of October deadline. Thanks so much.